Yeah, yep. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hangersbury Head. It is a beautiful day in Dorset. I know the rest of the country is under snow right now, but here for some reason the sun is out, and so are we. I hope that some of you have come from last week as well, where we were doing ancient flint working, focused around sort of the Paleolithic up to the Neolithic, from our site in Hangersbury in Dorset. And this week we're going to be doing some more flint working. We're going to specifically be trying to make arrowheads, and we're going to be doing some ancient glue making and binding, which we've got our lovely Mark Holloway who'll be doing some of the glue making over there in our little firebox with some really cool bits of this. It's a really exciting session today to share with you. Just quickly before we begin, obviously you're all aware that we're in a pandemic right now, and that is terrible, and of course most people can't go back to work. Luckily we can continue to do this because it's part of a well, it's a volunteer group, and it's, well, yeah, it's very good. So we're all socially distanced, and the cameraman is maintaining a social distance away from us as well. We're outside, so that's all that's sorted. We're doing this as part of Performing the Past, which is a heritage lottery fund project which looks to engage local people in Dorset with their cultural heritage focused around the site of Hangersbury Head. This is where we are today. It's an exceptional site. It spans 12,500 years of human occupation, which is an incredible amount of time, all the way from the old Stone Age up until now. We're doing this with Parks in mind as well, which is Bill Parks Foundation, which do some really good work, getting people out into their local spaces to help them manage, which is tricky at the moment. If you have any questions throughout the session, please drop them in the comment section and we'll do our best to answer them. The cameraman can speak them out to us. And please like and share the video so any of your friends can watch this. And we're just gonna get on. I think that's everything. So last week we went through all of the main the basic principles of how to shape flint. Now flint is, I got in trouble for this, not how this actual rock forms. Flint is a mineralization of all the impurities in chalk beds. So if you think about the geology of lots of cliffs on the southern coast, it's chalk, and over millions of years the impurities that are filtered down to make a crystalline material called flint. Now why flint's useful and important is because it's a microcrystalline structure. It's very hard, but it's also very brittle. And now what that means is you can strike pieces off it and it maintains a very hard, sharp edge. Ancient hunter-gatherers exploited this because it made an improved material for making their arrows and spearheads, and allowed them to hunt better, allowed them to work wood better, and basically manage and gain the upper hand when it came to hunting and pursuing their prey and managing their local environment. Now at Hangersbury Head, it's a headland, and if you join us on another one of our scheduled virtual walks that we do, archaeology walks, we'll talk about all the different sites and different areas. But in the Paleolithic and even up into the Mesolithic, which is, about 12,500 years ago, to about 9,000 years ago, so a huge amount of time. The channel wasn't a sea yet, it was still a river that ran through. It was called Doggerland, and up at the top of Hangersbury Head was more like a cliff, not a shoreline. And you could look down into what's now the channel, and they tracked and hunted the different herds of animals, which they subsided off from a base camp at the top. North of England was covered by a glacier. It was almost Siberian in kind of the conditions, same as most of Northern Europe. So it's a very different environment people were living in, and they subsisted off the herds of animals, and they tracked them and they followed them, hunted them in a hunter-gatherer lifestyle before they developed farming. And this, flint, was their most important tool, arguably, second probably to fire, and we think that they went and collected and sourced their flint from the Isle of Wight, which is relatively close but still not very close, so they travelled a long way to get the right type of materials to make their tools. Now, flint knapping mainly goes with the principle of striking the flint with a harder stone or just a different shaped stone, or using soft materials like antler. And by doing this, you cause a ripple through the flint, and you pop off, ideally, a shaped piece that you're trying to knock off. So here's a piece that I prepared earlier. It's got a nice, very sharp edge here. It's quite. This mineralization is some of the remnants of the chalk which it was forming from back God knows how many millions of years ago, or currently, until it was removed out of the ground. That's not very good, so we want to remove that. And a good piece of flint doesn't have any impurities such as, if I compared to this. See, you have different areas of different mineralization, and that stops a clean break. So you want ideally a glass-like structure. So I'll show you with a pebble first. So you get it like that, and you strike it like that, and break it to pieces. That's not what you're meant to do, but see, so you knock off a flake. This isn't particularly well shaped, or it's got a bit of cortex off, so that's good for cleaning. And obviously you make a huge pile of wasted pieces of flint that you don't use. Now soft hammers like antler or wood, they allow you to knock off a much finer, longer, thinner flake, which we use for a lot of our arrows and blades. I'm going to use this one here and try and knock off, I'm trying to look for a nice sort of long edge. So I think I'm going to might try and knock off one from here. Like this. Now that's not obviously made a particularly lovely shape, but it is very sharp. Now ideally I'd spend a lot more time rendering this down into more of a sort of a cube shape or a sort of a cone shape, so I can strike off long, thin strips of it. And I've already done this with another piece, but all I've got left is this piece now, see? So you can knock off long blades like this as you go around the flint, but it started to break up because I've hit some impurities in there. And I'm also not a particularly skilled flint worker. But from that we've made an array of different flakes of flint. These are razor sharp, and importantly they're nice and thin. Now this one's a lovely example. You can see this ripple through the matrix of the flint, see? All the way through there, you can more feel it than see it. And here's a bulb at the top. Now this means this is where I struck it. On top of the bulb, it rippled down and it popped off the flint. Now that's what you're looking for if you're looking for an ancient flint. You find a flint, goes, is this an ancient flint that's been worked by a person? You're going to have these features in it. And they all have them to varying degrees. And there'll be some more features that I'm going to put on this later when we turn it into an arrow, which I'll talk to you about then. So that's what we're trying to do. I'm going to do this for a bit, and then I will hand you over to Mark, who is preparing the fire and doing some really cool mixing of different materials to make basically ancient adhesive. Really interesting. So I'm really looking forward to that in a minute. I'm going to try and make some more of these. Little blade, it's not particularly lovely shape, but it's sharp, and we can keep it and use it for a barb on the side of an arrow. As you imagine, I'm wasting a lot of flint, but well, it necessitates that you waste quite a lot to render it down into a useful core, but also a more skilled flint worker would obviously be wasting less. But all of this material, all of these fragments and small pieces, this is what we find on ancient sites, probably slightly more refined than this, but you find these layers of where someone has sat 12,500 years ago on top of Warren Hill, and they've sat and they've worked flint into their different artifacts, tools for them, and this is what we find. Really, this in a campfire, really where they've been cooking their food or heating up resin for glue, that's all you really see, because they weren't using subsistence structures, they weren't building houses, they were hunter-gatherers, they were staying and moving from place to place, and where they stayed to make their tools was really the most permanent positions they really had. And that was the way of life for thousands of years. Look at that. It's a lovely, it's a bit big, it's a bit chunky, but it is a very sharp, two-faced flake. Now we could rework that and put that in a stick, and that would make a pretty damn formidable spear, or knife, or anything. And if you ask us what we sacrificed to get this weather, I don't know. I think we're just very lucky or unlucky. I know some people are looking forward to snow, and we haven't got any. But none here as of yet. See, it's quite a nice thin flake, but it's got this horrible cortex on here, another piece here, another piece down there, so I'll keep it and I'll try and turn it into something, but not really what we're looking for. Now you can prepare the edge where you're going to strike from by rubbing a stone against it. I am not exactly sure how this helps, but it does. I've been taught it. I'm sure an engineer would probably know, an engineer of crystalline materials, like glass, would probably know how this helps. But you basically rough up the edge that you're going to strike from down, and it helps the flake come off. So I've roughed up here. I'm going to try and strike down here, and I'm going to try and knock off a nice thin, long flake. It's a little bit uneven, so I'm going to try and even that up. It's nice and flat as it can be. Leg. No, it's not coming off. Well, we got something out of it, but not really what I was aiming for. I think that's the difference between an amateur and a skilled craftsperson. Is a craftsperson could think about what they want to make and then make it happen, whereas an amateur has a go and then makes it up from the pieces they've ended up creating. Although, you know, the byproduct of doing a lot of this is you create all these small pieces, and a lot of them can be used for microblades. So there's not really a hell of a lot that is wasted. You can apply, you can go through and go, well, look, that bit there, it's got a bit of cortex, but it's still really sharp. You can still scrape away the bark off wood, turn it into a scraper there. It's really about what you need, what tools you need for the job at the moment. How are you doing, Mark?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, all just playing around with heat and pots and things. Morning. Got a nice little fire here. We're going to make some prehistoric glue, hopefully, soon, and then we're going to use that glue to glue into place a piece of sharp flint onto the tip of an arrow, and also use it to glue some feathers as flights. So we'll try and make what we'll call a Mesolithic arrow. Well, that really just means about 9,000 years ago we had people living here. We had people living here 12,000 years ago as what we call hunter-gatherers in the Old Stone Age. But in the Middle Stone Age, which is about 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, we had what we call the archers here, the people who they hadn't invented it, but they had bows and arrows as opposed to just spears. And we know that from places where archaeologists have found organic remains. We don't find them on Hangersbury Head because they were just here very temporary, and the conditions aren't right here for the preservation of sort of organic materials. So all we find are the flint tools, basically, for these Stone Age people. But we do know from other places and bogs and up in the Alps and things that where things have been preserved, that they had arrows and bows and arrows, etc., etc., and these other tools. So we're going to have a go at making an arrow today. We won't be firing it because we didn't bring a bow with us.
Shame.
And I think we need a bit more practice actually before we can make an arrow that's actually going to fire properly. So we've created a fire. Hayden's made a wonderful fire here this morning. In fact, it's too hot. And so this is the first time actually we've tried to create or make our glue on a proper fire. Usually I'm just doing it on with some modern equipment, a little gas stove and things. So what we're going to do soon, we've got a little crucible here, we've got a fire, and we're going to take this little pot that Hayden has prepared, and we're going to keep it warm enough to actually melt our glue. Now of course people didn't have pots in the Stone Age, but we're just mixing it up a little bit here. They probably would have had a stone with a hollow in it, and they would have heated that up in the fire, and that would have been a nice little crevice to make their glue and things like that. But just for the effect, we've got some pottery pots, crucibles that Hayden's made and lent us here this morning. So we're going to use that because it looks nice, I think. And the ingredients that we will use, and we'll pop backwards and forwards between me and Hayden because Hayden's going to make one or two little tools and flint tips, little microliths as we call them, that are going to be sitting on as the point of the arrow. So we've got a few other things here on our little prehistoric table. We've got some beeswax, we've got pine resin, and we've got some charcoal which we can grind up into a bit of a finer. So as you can imagine, resin from trees would have been available. Beeswax would have been available. These are all naturally occurring things, so our hunter-gatherers would have been able to amass those sorts of things. We don't know exactly what sort of resin that they would have used, or I don't anyway. I'm sure somebody's worked it out by now. So we're going to have a little go with this and see if we can make the right combination to get a sticky glue, and I think that's the key to it. That's the difficulty that one has, is actually making it sticky enough. I'm sure we've all tried to stick things together at home and not got the right combination of glue, and then it sort of looks like it's stuck, and then half an hour later it just falls off. So we're going to experiment with that and just heating it up in the fire. So, come back to our little table in a minute. I don't know if Hayden's got anything to add.
Well, do you want me to make an arrowhead now?
Absolutely. If you
Right.
could make something that is going
Sharp.
to sit on our little prepared arrow shaft, and we'll show you how to prepare that in a minute, but that's one we made earlier.
Okay, so this is a little hazel shaft here. What Mark's done is he's cut in here and made a groove. You can pull that up, I'm not going to. And what we want to do is we want to lay one of our prepared arrows that I'll shape in a moment into here, right? And then we're going to put the wood on the other outside and we're going to bind it in. And now, is that an example there, or is that just a sticker?
No,
okay.
this is about spoke shaving,
Yeah.
that's all, but we'll do that in a minute.
And there are a number of other tools. So what I need to do is I need to pressure flake, which we went through last week, but I'll talk about it and do it again. Pressure flake along the edge of this blade and shape it into a nice bi-faced arrow. And really, this would be fine, apart from it's got a bit of cortex here, which makes it nice and blunt at the end. So we don't want that. So we'll get rid of that. We'll hopefully shape it, hopefully not crack it in half, which happens quite a lot. And then what we'll do is, as you see, we talk about the bulb of percussion and the ripples. We'll snap off the bulb so it sits nice and flush. We'll slot it in here, and then hopefully we'll bind it and then glue it. And then we add some flights to it, and you've got really quite a scary arrow. That's it. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'll put that over there for a moment. Now, I've been working with hard and soft hammers here to strike off all these flints on this table. Now I can't really use this anymore to shape this because I run the risk of breaking it, and it's just too much of a cumbersome tool to work such a fine piece of flint. So what I need to do now is called pressure flaking. Now, what you use here is something called a tine, which antler, wood, and basically because it's so thin, I can physically just push off pieces of flint, flakes off this flint and shape it. Now, although this is a lovely long thin bladelet, it has got some patches of mineralization here, which means it won't break evenly, so I have to be very careful around these areas, especially here because they're next to each other, so it might crack across, and try and work this into a nice shape. Now, I only really want it, this is too big, so I only really want it about there, okay? So I'll be shaping the edges, this top piece, and I'll snap off the bottom bit. Now, knowing my luck, I will work the entire thing into a lovely shape, and I'll go to snap it off at the end, and I'll snap the whole thing off. But we're learning. So, how do I want to work this? How do I want to change the shape of this? We'll start at the end. So, I get it flush to my working surface, which is this leather on my leg. I get the tine and put it on top, and I just crack off a piece. Okay. Now I keep doing this with the hope that I don't break it in half. See, there, I'm just bringing that edge in. Now I'll do the same on the other side. Now, archers have a different method, and usually working with, I think, later arrowheads are much more of what you'd expect a leaf-shaped arrowhead. Now what they do is they do something along the lines of, they do this, and they bring it in like that. And that's for when you make your biface, but we'll do that at the end. I'm just going to try and get this into a rough arrow shape. It's quite thick, and I'm struggling to get a good point on it, but let's persevere. We really don't want that bit of, mineral at the end, but I can't get it off. I can't get it off. And your animals are snapping the tip off the arrowhead, which obviously is worse. So that's better. That is sharp. So I'll go around and I'll bring this side in a bit, and I'll do both the edges on this one here. So it's going to be a bit different. There'll be flint workers watching this going, God, what's he doing? See, the problem, ideally you'd have a tie-in without this bit here, so it's just a thing, so it's a little bit awkward, but no worries. A bit more here. Okay, so that's starting to be a bit more uniform there. We're snapping it off from here, so ignore this bit. So that's what we're having, so that's looking good. So we want to get the edge on here the same, so we'll go along this edge and just try and... Now the tine's actually wearing down a bit, so of course if we were hunting and gathering we would have a lot more skins and a lot more antler. So we've done both edges now. It's nice and sharp, but it's straight. I mean, I'm not going to debate the. Let's just try it. Don't snap the end off. Okay, it's gone up. The idea is to make what's called a biface. So that's straight on that edge. See? And on that edge, I am going to work the tip. It's making me a little bit scared because obviously I don't want to snap it off. But let's just try and get that. Let's have a go. See See, it's the longer you spend on an artifact, whatever material you're working with, metal, flint, pottery, ooh, the closer you get to the end, come on, the more nervous you get. Lovely, that's wickedly sharp now. And this is probably we're pretty transitioning out of the Mesolithic into the Neolithic or the Bronze Age of this method. Really, I think the Mesolithic points are such as this. It's already very sharp. It's already pretty much in a nice straight thing. You just snap it off to size and then you put it into wood. But we're having a go. It's not serious. It's not a serious thingy. We're just trying to make some. And in different areas, depending on what they're hunting, they use this to make their harpoons. They also use bone. But flint is the technical material for that period. It's what they use to really interact and to dominate their environment. And I think really the hunter-gatherer period, the Paleolithic to the Mesolithic, is arguably one of the last times that human beings lived with nature, not off nature. We followed herds. When we started using tools, which obviously is seen in nature, but not to the degree that human beings do it. But then in the following 1,000 years, where we developed agriculture, where we started staying in one place, domesticating cattle, cutting down woodland to make farmland, that's where we started to really break away from nature, and arguably caused quite a lot of damage. But it's led us to where we are now. One problem is, I've worked this bit here. This is all lovely. However, the tip here is quite thick, and it's not really thick enough for what we want. So I'm trying to show you. See, it's quite thick. The sides here are nice and sharp, nice and worked. Probably more like a saw than an arrowhead, but the tip here is quite thick now. I'm not sure how I can reshape that without breaking it. I'm not going to think this size anyway. How are we doing for time? Okay, we've got half an hour left. Well, I'll tell you what, we won't try and do the end. We've got some more points here that we can use.
I think I might have to start doing this because it's running out of time.
Now, the method they do is they're meant to just snap this in half. Okay, you ready?
No? That's quite a thick piece of it, but it's quite a thick...
There you are. Well,
almost perfect.
Almost perfect.
We'll make it work.
I'll put that on there. And that's what you'll use as your arrow.
Lovely.
Chunky, but it will do it. It will work. You just render... this one here, which is pretty much already in a very, this is more of a Mesolithic blade. I'll try and get rid of this cortex up here very rapidly for Mark.
We don't have to do it that quick. I mean, you can come back over here and we can start to put the resin in and then you can come back to that if you want.
Okay, well, yeah, fine. Let me just try and make that a bit so you can wrap some cord around it without it cutting the cord.
Where is it?
Yeah, this side. There you go, right. So, here is your arrowhead, Mark.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll try not to break it. That one there. Thank you. Look at that. Fantastic. fantastic. I'll keep on playing here. I can't make another one. So what we're going to do now is here's one that we made earlier. We didn't make this. This is on display in the Hangersbury Head Centre. So you can see there's flight feathers. There's different ways of mounting these, but we're just going to try and imitate this today with just two feathers. This is a piece of wooden dowling, but we're using a piece of hazel which we've got a spoke shave to actually to clean off the bark, etc. And as Hayden has said, he's made a nice flint tip, and we're going to put a little bit of twine. What we wanted to do was to use some nettles and make some twine out of that, but obviously we haven't really got nettles around at this time of year. But we can do that in the spring and the summer. We can come back to that and make some twine with nettles, and then we have our glue that we're going to make now. So we'll put that down for a moment. So just to come back to the glue, we've got we can come over here if you want. We've got our ingredients. So we've got a hot fire. We've got a pot that's got too hot, and when it gets too hot, the resin starts to boil, and then it can burst into flames. So what I'm going to do is to, you might want to come around this side, Peter, and then look over my shoulder if you want to look in there. We're going to, is that okay? I can move it a little bit further away from me if you want. Just get it to the smoke. It's pretty hot, that. So we're going to put in some resin, and this is what the resin, just remind you, that's what it looks like. That should start to melt quite quickly, and it actually will, I think it's going off. If not, we'll pop it back in the fire. Put a bit more in.
Do you want me to make you a spoke shave?
Yes, please. Hayden's going to make a spoke shave, that's so that we can scrape another piece of hazel nice and clean. This is all a bit experimental. Just see what happens there. That doesn't look like it's going to go off. We'll pop it back in the fire. Temporarily.
Stone Age cooking.
Sorry about the smoke. Right, so while we let that resin we'll keep an eye on that because we don't want it to burst into flames. But we might put a bit more in, so that's about 4, 5 little handfuls. When that starts to melt, we'll put some beeswax in. Now the beeswax, if we just made it with the pine resin, it'd probably be quite brittle, and I found that following the experts say that if you add some beeswax, it tends to make it a little bit more malleable and a little bit softer, and therefore when it dries, it just doesn't break up and go brittle and fracture as much. So we're going to put some of that in a minute once this is actually started to melt. It's starting to do now. Sorry about all the smoke. We do have a fail-safe. I've got a little gas cylinder hidden away if this all else fails. But Hayden has a brilliant fire starter. He's got an excellent record in starting fires, and he's assured me that this is going to work perfectly.
Well, I insist we use slightly more authentic material. Although I do love a butane camp burner, don't get me wrong. If we've got some pot and we've got a real fire going, we could really have a go. So it's an experiment.
Yeah, it's fine. It's excellent. So what we're going to do, we've got pine resin, which is the main constituent of the glue. And if we just made it with that, it would look like glue and it feel like it. Then we're adding the beeswax to make it a little bit more malleable and not so brittle. And then we're going to add a little bit of carbon. So we can get some charcoal out of the fire, which we did earlier. And this is just acts as a bit of a temper for it, really. It helps to, depending on how much you put in, it just helps to make it a little bit more fluid and bind a bit better. The idea with this really is just to, if we can, make it into a fine powder. I'm doing this on a piece of wood, but then one could just do it, have a nice stone sort of cradle to put this in and then grind it down.
And they were undoubtedly good woodworkers, because they had access to wood and wood tools for a lot longer than they did flint. So the legends were very good. Definitely are indeed.
Has that melted yet in there? Right, it's going. I don't know if you can see into there with the yeah,
Smoke shade is on the table.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. Just while that so Hayden's just made a spoke shave. Just to show you what we prepared earlier, because it's difficult to do all this within an hour. To prepare this shaft for the arrow and strip it down, we've got that lovely little tool there, and it happens to fit just perfectly around the shaft of this piece of wood. So we can use this to very effectively clean up the wood, to take out any nasty little knots. Because you can imagine when you fire an arrow, it passes right past your hand, so anything that sticks out is going to catch and it will be rather uncomfortable. The same applies to the flight feathers as well. If we bind them up too much and you've got something sticking out.
You can cut your hand off, can't you?
Yep.
I'm quite excited to actually see some of the fletching, because that's something I've never got the chance
Not
to
my
do.
fletching though. So that's the principle of that, using that. So we can make all these little tools. You can have a whole kitchen cabinet full of tools, just like we do at home. I think Hayden's going to make a serrated knife as well at some point.
Yeah.
Which is very easy to do with just two pieces of flint rubbing them across each other's edge, and then you ended up with like a serrated knife. So, our glue is starting to melt. I think we've got some. Can you see into there now? I don't know if you can just see that. It's quite liquidy. That's mainly resin. So what we're going to do, we'll add. There was about 5 little handfuls of resin I put in there. So we're going to put perhaps 1 or 2 pieces of beeswax. Perhaps that will do. So it would be like a 2 to 3 to 1 ratio. I think I might just leave that out. I don't think there's any hard and fast rule about exactly what you do. If you Google this on the internet, you'll find all sorts of bushcraft recipes for doing this type of thing. The easiest way to find is actually just to Google something that's called Cutler's recipe.
We can hardly go and ask, can we?
No. Well, the secret, I think, is to not let it boil too much. Once it's boiled, the resin's boiled, you never get it back to sort of like a malleable state. It'll always be brittle, so we don't want to overheat this. The other thing is, when we were doing a little trial earlier before we went live, we actually managed to set fire to the resin then, which can be quite dangerous because there's a lot of fumes coming. Yes, if you start to get boiling point for it, it's so look, our beeswax is pretty much gone now. So we can take, we'll get a little bit more of our powdery charcoal. Hayden's given me another little pot. I don't know if he meant to give me this pot for something. I just wonder whether we could...
I love a pot. Stuff in it.
I'm going to put it in there, look, how sweet.
If there are any people who are in Dorset and who would like to get involved with our volunteers, at the moment we're doing this all virtually of course, but when we can we'll be doing this in reduced size, with the restrictions and everything else, but we still want to explore different materials being used in Hengistbury Head, and we have a number of different citizen science projects to do that. It's quite exciting, and anyone especially who's interested in historic clothing and has any experience with making, well, I think it's seamstry, sewing, and putting together costume and pattern making, have you get in contact with us, because we'd really like to do some of that and we need some expertise because we don't have them in-house at the moment. Anyone else who's interested, please just get in contact with us through the link or drop a comment, and we'll get back to you and to be a part of all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some lovely skins here, and we want to get the materials to actually make those hunter-gatherer clothing, and Bronze Age and Iron Age eventually, and sort of bring it to life. So, as Hayden says, if anybody's got those seamstress type skills and wants to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. It'd be great. It's difficult looking into the sun and talking at the same time. Anyway, so we've got our charcoal, a little powdered charcoal, so we could add a little bit of that. We're not going to add a lot, but it's just enough to temper it a little bit and help to keep it fluid and bind it a bit more as the glue sets. Start to see if you actually take a little bit out and put it on something, it does sort of start to set quite quickly. You can probably see, I suppose it's the equivalent of a glue gun today. What did you say? Pritt stick? It has got quite a nice smell actually, this.
Oh, does it? Well, that will, yeah, not Pritt stick.
This has, no. You know what it's like when you're fiddling with glue, then you get it stuck on your fingers, and it's all sort of quite similar, really.
I can't come over and watch what Mark was doing, so I have to watch back later and see what he's doing. I can't come over.
Oh dear.
I don't.
That's nothing to do with COVID though, it's just that we don't like you. You don't. That's not true. Couldn't be a better day today, could it? And it's lovely being out here on Hangersbury Head.
Oh yeah,
Fantastic. So there we are. It's starting. We can start to be able to use that in a minute. So we'll get the shaft ready. I don't know if Hayden's got anything else to show you, but otherwise I can plod on with this.
Well, all I'm doing at the moment is I'm making a new core to try and make some more bladelets, some more arrowheads. But it's a very thick cortex, so I'm working very hard to knock off all of these bits and make some nice long striking faces. I can try and knock some nice long bladelets off that are nice and thin. But I'm still working at that. And I've separated out these little ones over here, these small, very sharp blades. And what we can use those for is we can put them in the side of the shaft of the arrow as barbs.
Right. So we're going to. So in fact, what we'll try and do. I mean, we don't really want to talk about this too much because some people might think, oh gosh, we're hunting animals. But you know, the fact is, if we were stuck out here now, a nuclear bomb had gone off and we didn't have any other resources, it wouldn't take very long for us to think, well, how on earth are we going to eat something? And hunger will take over. So you'd have to go out and hunt an animal, wouldn't you? I think. I think today we have the luxury and enough money to not to have to go and do that.
Yeah, supermarkets.
But so you obviously want to make a piece of equipment which is as dangerous as possible. And there is an argument, I suppose, if you're going to fire an arrow to an animal, you don't want it to suffer, and therefore you want to be able to kill it as quickly as possible. So those are the sorts of barbed equipment.
Back then, if the animal got away, you wouldn't eat, and neither would your family. So
quite.
It's imperative.
So there we are, and we're going to. Hayden's just made some nice little bits of flint wood to try and slot them in down the side there as well.
And really, most of these just come off during the working process. You get some nice little thin flakes, but then you can reshape them and then snap them off to the right length and keep working. Some of these are wickedly shaped, wickedly sharp. It doesn't really matter as long as they're the right kind of shape, like that one. Shape it coarsely in my case. One more to put on our arrow. We don't need lots, just a couple. And then I will probably continue working this one to try and get something like this, but pointier and thinner. This is very thick. It's more of a lot of effort.
So chaps, we have 20% battery power left at the moment.
You want my...
We're fine for now. How much more time do you?
Do you have your backup power?
I do, but I can't plug it in whilst...
Peter may have to put you down for a moment.
Well, actually,
plug you in.
we can do it without that microphone. So
yes, we'll lose. Well, the microphone we've got at the moment, the directional one with the wind cancelling, that's what's plugged in. So it's either microphone or power. So I think we'll crack on with the microphone until we get close, and we might have to disconnect it. But it's not too windy today. But you might experience a change in audio. Not the right shape. I'd ideally like some nice continuous straight edges that I can strike off from, like this one here. But of course, trying to strike that edge on the corner here is quite tricky coming down because it's hanging over the wrong one. So really it requires, I want to clean off this whole side, clean off that side and try and get it into a good shape. But it's I am struggling a wee bit to do that. Now I'm sure there's an experienced flint knapper in the audience going, that's because they're not doing something. But I can't. Well, if you do know, tell me. But I'm very much a learner as I go. And more. Come on. Wow, okay. There we go. Get rid of that nasty bit. Now it's getting, it was quite nice and clean earlier, but it's getting quite, this is more like granite than, well not, it's obviously not granite, but it's more like a stone than it is like flint at the moment. So I'm going to try and avoid that area. Keep going. How are you doing, Mark? Are you tying it on?
Yeah, I'm just fiddling, but I'll come over to me in a minute. I'll just
Okay.
prepare this.
Okay. I think we go to Mark now. He's going to try the next part of the binding and gluing of the arrowhead. If you have any questions, do drop them in the comments.
So we're going to, normally we'd use some sinew, animal tendon, but we're not going to do that today. And failing that, in the summer we've made it with some twine with nettles. The great thing about animal sinew is that once you wet it, or as we used to do many years ago, but we're not allowed to do that now after BSc, is to actually chew it, and it becomes quite sticky and very malleable. But we're just going to use some little bits of hemp twine today, and perhaps hopefully we'll have an opportunity to make some nettle twine in the summer. And I was just going to put a little bit of glue on here just to bed this down, because I'm really cack-handed and trying to tie little knots and things. It's going to go all over the place. So there was the flint tip. We were trying to imitate what we said earlier was a Mesolithic arrow. Now that's a Middle Stone Age, perhaps 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, when people were camping on the top of Hangersbury Head. This is the excavation that was carried out as a rescue excavation by Nick Barson from Oxford University. It's not very far from the Coast Guard station on top of Hangersbury Head, and it would have been a camp where people could view out across the valley below. There was no sea nearby then, that was many miles distant, but there would have been a river valley, and it would have been a safe place to light a fire, a good vantage point, and to be able to see where animals and things were moving. So they probably sat there at their campfire napping away, just like Hayden's doing now, creating a hell of a mess. So I've let that all go solid while I was yapping away, but that a little bit more might just be enough to hold that. So this is the cack-handed bit for me, and because this is so sharp, this hemp twine that we're just using today is likely to catch the edge, I think, and snap probably. What I want to do is, probably have to come back a bit, create a couple of half hitches just to finish this off. In normal circumstances we'd probably spend quite a bit more time doing this, but we don't really have enough time today. All right. Oh, there we are, caught the edge. Thought that might happen. So what we'll do is get another piece of twine. Start again. Yeah, no, I think it's okay. It's just that we'll just keep that bit there for. Let's see if we can Have we had any questions today, Peter, or anything? Or not?
Not a sausage.
Oh.
Please do ask any questions if you've got them of Mark and Hayden here.
Is there anybody watching?
we have some people watching.
Great.
Or just press like to say hello. I think I'm going to change this microphone over for the power pack now, so just a slight change in audio. Definitely do with a slightly longer piece of thread, that's the trouble. I'll just try and see if we can put some glue on that. It's not perfect. A bit longer thread. Cut back to Hayden. I will have to start again with this. Sorry about that. And look in there.
were here last week and you watched our session, or if you're just watching for the first time today, do let us know in the comments if you'd like us to do longer sessions. Obviously at the moment we're just doing an hour. That's quite manageable for us, but obviously if it's something you think people would enjoy or you would enjoy as a viewer, let us know, because at the moment this is all we can do because of the COVID restrictions. We can only do this outside social distance. Does limit us, but we plan to run a pretty exciting program of pottery making, pottery firing, and bronze alloying and bronze casting. If we can find some people who have got the skills to do basketry or to do some weaving, we'd like to do that as well. And obviously ancient costume making, as well as ancient pigments and paints and dyeing. Hangersbury Head has the most incredible array of archaeological evidence, obviously spanning this huge time frame. Actually, in the Iron Age, it turns into an international port of trade, one of the largest in southern Britain, we think. So it's a really exceptional site. We've got to explore all the different areas, and we're currently going through government approval because this is actually a scheduled monument. This, to the back of us here, is the double dykes, and this is a we think a defensive earthwork, an embankment, a double embankment, which they constructed in the Iron Age to basically delineate the entirety of the headland from mainland Britain. So it's a statement, and it's a demonstration of power. But actually, what we're inside this area, we're going through the process of getting approval to build a replica Iron Age roundhouse, which is a really exciting project. We're going to hopefully do that over there and going for the approval to get some more sandboxes put in. So hopefully, come the summer, we should have a much more involved area, hopefully with some restrictions then being lifted, maybe. We can then do some more in-depth stuff. So do keep tuned in because we'll be doing lots more, and it should be getting more and more exciting. Or we could be getting better at doing flint working. We'll all be getting better at our respective little bits, and yeah, so that's really exciting. So I've turned that large piece of flint into a small piece of flint. That's really all I've particularly achieved. I've come across some lovely fossils inside the flint, which is not ideal for. See up there, little one there, little shiny thing. Probably can't see it glittering, can't get the angle right for you, but just there. So obviously this is formed in chalk, which is made up of the deposition of lots of dead animals and not plant matter, all sorts of bones really, millions of years ago. So there will be some fossils in it. Quite rare, I haven't seen one before. Does mean that it isn't particularly great for when you're trying to work a flint, but I do wonder what ancient flint workers would have seen, 12,000 years ago, seeing these things in the flint. What would that meant to them? Would it have been important? Would it have been a hindrance? We don't know. We can only really wonder. And that's when people say, would you want a time machine? So no. It ruins it. If we knew what was happening, there wouldn't be any of the wonder of pursuing to, what actually happened. It's like being a detective 2,000 years ago, in my research anyway.
In answer to your question, Ben has said would love to see more of everything. So that's
Brilliant.
Good.
I like
Ben.
the enthusiasm, Ben. Thank you very much. We shall give you more of everything. So, a bit thick. Now I'm trying to just render this down into a core, right? So I want to turn this to a flat face with lots of small radiating bits. This is a bit of a problem here because it's sticking out. See? Well, it's nice and smooth all the way down, and then what we do is we can just strike off long blades. Now I'm just trying to work out how I'm going to shape this down. It's probably where the skill comes in, is to making, because once you've got the core, it's relatively easy to actually just knock off blades. Like that, see? Because you've already made it into a nice long flat surface. This is crap, so pardon me. see in a minute. Blasphemy. It's always good to have a plan B. Messing myself up. Need a pebble really between this, half of this size. That's what I ideally need. Oh, nice but thick little blade. Again, but a bit minerally, so it won't really shape up particularly well. Back up this. Nope. Nope. Maybe. Yep. Like that. Starting to make nice. It's got quite short, but it's starting to make nice sort of flat surfaces radiating down. Still got to sort this out. Oh no. There we are. Get rid of this one as well. Go this way.
We'll have another go at this.
Okay, right, Mark's ready to go again. I'll hand you over.
Time, otherwise doing our flights, won't we?
Yeah.
So we had to get this to melt down again because the potter got cold and the glue had gone off. So we'll start again, just giving a little bed for this to sit on, and then put that on there and let the glue just, it'll help us to bed that in, and then we can start to hopefully secure it a bit better this time. But due to the time, it's not going to be that pretty really, but
Pretty don't skin the deer.
no, get that far. Half hitch. Pull that round there. Try not to cut the twine this time on the sharp edge of the blade. So if we do another one, another half hitch. Oh. Bit springy. I think I'd like to tighten that off a little bit more, but I think, you know, as we're going to run out of time. Oh, it's not as hot as I thought it would be, huh? We will start to... Now I've melted it, it's gone too runny. Can't win.
Experience, Mark.
Yep. We'll cut off the little extra bits of twine afterwards, but this is hemp, so it's at least it's fairly natural. Oh, the fire's coming back to life. So we're getting there. So the next thing, we'll let that set a minute, and then we'll get to the flight feathers to wish I hadn't set the fire going again now. We don't need it. Right, what's white feather? We'll cut those off in a minute. So that's sort of set, and we'll just tidy it up. So we're just going to do a very simple fletching thing here, but very, very simple. So we're just going to put 2 feathers, one on either side, and in the end of here we've got a little notch, which obviously will be for the bowstring. I think we've got a bit of sand in there, but something prepared earlier. So I think one way we could do this with, hopefully, you'd use a bit of glue just to glue this down to begin with. We'll see. Just to hold it in place. Perhaps it should be sticky enough to do that. And it's pretty sticky. It's interesting, I can pick that pot up now and it's still quite melted inside, so that yeah, it takes a little while to go the glue to go off actually, which is quite good.
Well, yeah, the pot should hold the heat.
Yeah. One thing, that the glue's worked really well. Much stickier than normal. How's your power supply, Peter?
I think we're okay for now.
Good.
Yeah.
Just enough to hold it in place. It's not the prettiest job, but it's the principle. Oh, it's got stuck to my finger. God, God. Let's get something to cut. A nice little sharp blade. That's a bit gobby, but still, it'll be better next time. Well, it doesn't really matter about the look, as long as it's solid and it's a dangerous implement. We've got a couple of fight feathers on there, not the prettiest as I say, but that would definitely be able to fire that. Might be a slight thing about once you actually fire it and pull it back, and as it runs past your finger, we've got quite a big blobby mess of glue there, but that's the principle of it. So we can put that on our... so actually what you can make at home is to show how feathers could, like on a dart, if you get a cork and a couple of feathers, make up earlier, you can have quite a lot of fun with your kids making these and see how far you can get them to go. But we made this one earlier, so I don't know if Peter's going to film this. So you could get a little bit of wood and a couple of feathers, stick them in the back of it like that, and then if they can stay in. This is with the wind, so it probably won't work. There we are.
Try that again. Do that again. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, perhaps towards me, yes. Oh, pretty good.
It's something to do during lockdown. Homeschooling. Aerodynamics. The other thing that reminds me of is like seeds, like sycamore seeds and things like, you know, they have little wings, don't they? And then it helps to carry it a little away from the tree. So you're not still waiting for me to do it again, are you? Oh, that's much better. Do you see that? Gosh. Et voila.
On a pot of Stone Age glue.
Stone Age glue, yeah. Of course, we can use
Bit of fletching.
We didn't do our carrots.
Nice
did we?
arrow.
We didn't prepare our dinner. So what we can do is use our spoke shave or anything really, just to prepare our dinner for tonight. One reason why you wouldn't want to run that down your fingers, so how effective it is. Certainly as sharp as glass, I think they say, but probably doesn't last quite as long, so you have to keep retouching it to keep it sharp.
Basically glass. Basically glass.
Yeah.
You can do napping at home with glass, but I say you do that with your own discretion.
Yeah. And we were going to, we were going to cut a little bit of card as if we were cutting a bit of hide.
I'll show you.
Kate will show you. We would normally try and cut a piece of hide as if we were making some clothing, but just a demonstration about how sharp it is.
So this one's quite a thick one, so the thinner you get, the sharper it is. But and the thinner you get it, it's got a label on it. If we get a nice thin one, I was going to use this for a barb on the side, but it is just sliced through the cardboard. A bit of leather I'd show you, but it is. They actually some surgeons use obsidian tipped scalpels. So it is literally, if you ever use razor blades, they are like razor blades when they're thin enough. If you hold it, you can see that through the sun, hopefully you can see how thin it is. It's practically opaque. And you can get the really thin flakes, the microblades, and they are exceedingly sharp. But they're very brittle. So obviously I can crack the edge of my fingernail here because it's like glass. But on the right as well, they're nice and straight. They are extremely sharp and will cut pretty much anything. And you'd use them obviously to shape your tools. This is antler, which is quite hard, and you can just gouge out and cut from that. You can see we have lots, and the majority of the ones on the floor here are still really sharp, so you don't need it to be as scalpel sharp as that. But a lot of them will do the job of, you need to scrape off some hide or cut some antler, you know, they do work. So really useful material. So how are we doing for time?
Nearly 12 o'clock.
Nearly 12 o'clock. Okay.
So we'll probably be thinking about.
Yeah, how did your arrow turn out?
How did my arrow?
Yeah.
Haven't you seen it?
Well, over from there, you bring it closer and show it up to me. I want to see it.
Well, it's a bit
I can't go over there and obviously, you know, get close and have a look at it all.
It's a bit gobby.
Well,
I wouldn't want to fire it.
no?
Well, apart from putting it in the fire. It's the principle, though. It's okay. All right, though.
Oh, great. Look at that.
The glue work, that was the main thing.
The glue, yeah.
It's the best glue I've
yeah,
seen,
wow.
actually. It's
Perfect. And the flights. Good thing we haven't got a bow out here, innit? Otherwise we'd have to shoot it. Can't help myself. We're kids.
Do you want me to take the resin out of your pot?
It's not my pot. It was actually one of the pots made by one of the volunteers, so it's one
so
of.
we can just keep
yeah.
it next time.
Well, it gets used as a resin pot. I mean,
that,
ceramics are brilliant. You know, many of you probably got a ceramic dish at home for cooking, and once it gets to temperature, it just holds that heat in such a dense material. And we lined the bottom of the fire pit with bits of broken pot that refracts all the heat up. So you could probably cook off that small campfire for a while now, because it will retain that heat in it.
Sigrid, I think you might know, is one of the volunteers. Says thank you. It's great that the camera can zoom in and show some of the detail.
Brilliant. I'm glad it comes across, because we're obviously outside. We're doing this off mobile data, and that obviously can fluctuate or can be just poor. I've done live sessions before in Sussex, and it's been, it's like watching pixels. So I'm glad that we can zoom in and can show you some of the detail, because really that's where a lot of the interesting bits are. And in place of you being here in person, which we can't do, that's the best we can do. So I'm glad it comes through. and with any luck, we'll be able to download this from Facebook as a good quality, and then we can re-put them up again, either on our website, or you can find it up at Hangersbury Head Visitor Centre. We've got a page on there. Performing the Past is the name of the project. We may set up some other things like a Facebook or YouTube account and other stuff like that. So we start to build up all of the videos that we've been doing, and then you can all go and find them. We've got some other ones. We've got a talk we did about the research, the Performing the Past project that we're doing. So if you're interested, do head over there and have a look at that. And the last week's Flint Knapping is also on Facebook on the same page in Parks and Mind. If you scroll down through there, it's a really interesting Facebook page as well. You'll be able to find some of our other stuff as well.
Cool.
I think really that's all we can do today. Thank you very much for coming.
We've got another one on. Is it the next? When's our next one?
Our next one is on the 15th of February, so in a couple of weeks' time.
What is it? Pottery making?
Yeah.
Ah, wrong picture. Wrong picture. Something to do with Iron Age, is it?
Yes. We were up
here,
Neolithic,
double dikes. Is it Neolithic pottery?
Neolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age. All the pottery periods, yeah.
There are little periods. This is a Bronze Age ritual cremation. This is our early Iron Age settlement, the later Iron Age port, and the double dikes. But we're going to be making pottery, or you are anyway.
I'll be making pottery, yeah.
Excellent.
I'll be going through all the different ancient methods of how people made their pots, all the way from the beginning of pottery in the Neolithic up until around about the Iron Age. Now I practice pottery, but I'm not a pretty proficient potter. It's all hand built, and this is going to be a session that we're running with our volunteers, where we're sending out packs of pottery and sand, and then we're making it all together as an online event. So it's not open to everyone apart from the volunteers who've already got back to us, but we're going to record the session and hopefully we can put it up for you so you can watch us do it. And then following that, later in February, we'll be doing a pottery firing session where all the pots all the volunteers have made, we're going to get them all together here. We're going to pile them up inside our sandbox, and we're going to do a bonfire firing. We're going to try and fire them into full ceramic vessels. So that should be really good fun. And then we can use those pots for demonstrations and use them actually at the centre.
So all these events will be they'll be on your Parks in Mind programme, but from now on they'll be on the Hengistbury Head Visitor Centre website. So if you go to visit hengistburyhead.co.uk, I think, anyway, it's visit Hengistbury Head, and you'll find running events on there, which we're going to post up there next week, taking us through to March. So that's probably a first port of call to find out what's coming up next.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you have a good Monday and a good rest of the week.
Thank you, Peter, who's behind the camera.
Thank you, Peter, very much for being wonderful. And we'll see you later.